Yo, it's ZBeefyGamr here, and today I'm discussing Dishonored 2 in terms of DLC. If we take a look at Dishonored 1's DLC release dates, we can kind of make a prediction as to when Dishonored 2's DLC will be released. Looking at our Dishonored DLC timeline here, we can see that it begins in October 2012 and ends in September 2013. Dishonored 1 was released on the 9th of October 2012, the first DLC, Dunwall City Trials that is, released on the 11th of December later on that year. The next DLC, a fully fledged story DLC called Knife of Dunwall, releases on the 16th of April, and later that year the last DLC, the Brigmore Witches DLC, releases on the 13th of August. Now that we know the dates, we can actually look at the difference between them. Dunwall City Trials was released 2 months and 3 days after the first game, a short period of time. Knife of Dunwall was released 6 months and 7 days after Dishonored, a half year later than the original game. And Brigmore Witches was released 10 months and 4 days after the main game, nearly a year later. And it also released 3 months and 28 days after Knife of Dunwall, nearly 4 months, which in itself is a short amount of time. Now if we apply this information to Dishonored 2, it should look something like this. Here's the Dishonored 2 DLC timeline. We'll start with the release date of Dishonored 2, which was on the 11th of November 2016. Using the information from Dishonored 1's DLCs, we should be able to predict the next DLC release date, which would be the 14th of January. Of course, this date has already passed, and we'll get to that point later on in the video. Dishonored 1's DLC schedule tells us that the story DLCs for Dishonored 2 should release on the 18th of May and 15th of September. Looking here, we see that the distance between the DLCs remain the same, as we are following the same schedule. According to these dates, Dishonored 2's first DLC should have already been released sometime around the 14th of January, but as we all know, there has been no mention of any DLC from Arkane Studios or Bethesda, and I believe that this is because of two major reasons. The first being that the game has a large quantity of technical errors on PC, which Arkane Studios is no doubt still spending all of their energy devoted to fixing, and the second reason being that Dunwall City Trials was only a small DLC. There was no story, just arcade style missions for the player. Maybe Arkane Studios is deciding to opt for something different this time around. I believe that these DLCs will most probably be delayed by days, weeks, or even longer, as there is no real issue date from Arkane Studios, plus they still have to deal with those technical difficulties. Even if Arkane Studios were following a similar schedule, they'd already be 2 months late. Remember, these are just predictions, I could be way off. Recently, however, there has been a beta testing CD key on Steam for Dishonored 2 labeled Black Sparrow for beta testing. This has been up since the 21st of February. In the book for Dishonored, The Corroded Man, Emily Calden wears a Black Sparrow costume on her way to a masquerade ball, thus meaning that the Black Sparrow name could be hinting at an Emily Calden DLC. This could be the January DLC that Arkane Studios had to delay because of those technical errors and are aiming to announce soon. If Arkane Studios were to make a DLC on Emily, it would have to be set after the events of Dishonored 2, as if it was set before, Emily wouldn't have any powers, and powers itself are a core gameplay element of the Dishonored franchise. If it was set in the future, Arkane Studios would have to canon a lot of the choices in Dishonored 2, as they have done with the first game. Maybe Black Sparrow will release sometime this month, being a small DLC like Dunwall City Trials with no real story. Or maybe it's just a codename for a minuscule Emily adventure set after the game's end. One would also have to take into account of the last panel in the end of the game, of Megan Foster, which in itself leads us to believe that the story DLC will have some sort of focus on Megan Foster. Maybe she'll get the mark of the outsider. Maybe we will finally get to visit those other isles, and maybe even the Pandician continent itself. She has a boat after all, plus that would allow her to set an adventure after the game's end, and not interfere with the canonizing of the main story. Remember, these are just predictions. Thanks for watching, and goodbye!